Okay, welcome back everybody. We're in week 11 already, and we're going to talk this week about biodigital devices. You may hear them mentioned as biometric devices, and they're pretty easy to explain. They're basically using your body or the body of someone to trigger a security event, be it a entry control or camera or even itself, and some identifier from the body to trigger something. But we refer to them as biodigital devices now because they're more than just reading. They're actually creating files, encrypted files, so that much of the biology, much of the privacy concerns start to diminish. They don't go away, though, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So first we start off, as we should, with some definitions. So a biodigital device is any hardware form of human integrated technology. So it is a piece of hardware, a piece of security hardware that uses biology, uses the human physiology, uses some human element to work, right? It provides a unique and consistent identifier of the holder. So I would say, in order to think about that, you see now we have cameras that take somebody's temperature to see if they have a fever. With COVID-19, those have become very, very popular items, very expensive items as well. But they're not identifying the person. They are simply telling us whether that person it's pointed at has a temperature or not, has a fever or not, and then something else identifies the person, be it facial recognition or be it just someone there who's asking, "What is your name, sir?" as you take their temperature. So it's providing an identifier of the holder, not just something about the holder, but the holder themselves. And it's used to allow or deny access, to show presence of an individual, or to integrate with other systems to provide additional information about the holder or wearer. And by that last statement, by integrating with other systems, I'm talking about you may have a badge reader that you need both a badge and maybe a fingerprint to get into a room. So it's a secondary identifier, but it integrates with the badge system. If you don't have one or the other, you're not going to get in. So it's human integrated technology. It's consistent and it identifies the holder in some way by name. You know who it is, and it can integrate with other systems to allow access or to show the presence of an individual. Now, if you think about them in a larger context, biodigital devices aren't just security devices. Artificial organs that can be monitored and controlled remotely, pacemakers. A doctor can tell whether or not the pacemaker is working and what its rhythm is, and how it's affecting the body remotely. It's a biodigital device. They know from an identifier in that pacemaker that is John Smith's pacemaker, and they know that it is operating at X number of beats or impulses per minute. I'm not a doctor in that regard by any stretch, so bear with me on that. But brainwave technologies, very, very new in artificial limbs, where you use the brain waves to move an artificial hand or an arm or leg, as opposed to using some other mechanical type device. The actual brainwave technology is telling it what to do, which is kind of cool. High-tech e-skin, artificial skins, they're put on people and they're used to monitor all kinds of biologics, temperature, heart rate, breathing rates. Certainly, we have biodigital devices that monitor people's blood sugar for type 2 diabetes. Very popular. You see the advertisements on TV all the time. And there are also smart tattoos and implantable RFID chips. A company in California last year implanted 150 chips into their own employees by their choice. And they're using those for access control and other processes. But they can also read body temperature and even emotions, your reactions to different stimuli. But what are some more common uses of biodigital devices? Well, I tell Siri or Alexa to start my vehicle. And she asks me, I don't know why I call her she, well, because it's a female voice, I suppose, asks me for certain credentials, and I provide those, so it proves that it's me, and then my car will start in the driveway. My Apple Watch tells me to stand up every hour and walk around some, and then monitors whether I do that or not. It is using biodigital devices. It has me identified because the Apple Watch is registered to me and I put in my password, so the watch knows it's me. And it knows that I haven't stood up in a while, and it's telling me, get off your butt and walk around a little bit. Same thing with the Face ID on the Apple phone and Android to open up your phone. That's a biodigital device. It is using some form of biology, in this case your face, your facial recognition, to allow access to your phone. So there's very common uses, and they're getting more common by the minute. And I'm not overstating that by the minute, because there are tons of biodigital ways we access things by our voice, by our face, by our thumbprints and fingerprints. But they're becoming more and more commonplace in physical security as well. So we know access control readers, the ones that we're using for our projects, we're using standard card readers. I think that's really what almost 99.9% of security managers in the world would spec for a building like that, would be standard card readers. But could we use something else? Certainly. We could use, facial recognition, let's say, for simple permission, right? You walk up to the reader, which is essentially a camera built into a reader, and it tells me whether it's Brian or not, and whether Brian can come in and opens or doesn't open the door. Same thing with medical clearances, right? Testing my temperature, using facial recognition to show that it's me, and then also taking my temperature and not opening the door if I have a fever. Training, certain levels of training that I have to prove, or the presence of safety items, whether I'm wearing safety glasses, a hairnet, a face mask, rubber gloves, depending on what type of area I'm going to work in. We could certainly use some type of reader that's using biologicals, right? That's looking at my face and saying this portion of Brian's face is covered and it's by a mask because of the shape, and therefore he's allowed to come in. Now, in video surveillance and detection, crowd scanning is probably the largest thing. And again, many of these, I'm using facial recognition as an example, but certainly there are more. But in video surveillance, crowd scanning, we load a database full of pictures of people that we do not want to enter an area, and we use video to scan at high speed and pick up on the faces of people entering. Used a lot in places like the Super Bowl. A place like Disney would be well advised to use it, and I know that they have tested it, but I don't know if they're using it live. There are certain other ballparks that are using both video surveillance when people come in to pick up on undesirables for anti-terrorism purposes, and also using types of scanners for weapons that are not metal detectors, but rather using sonar to detect for shapes of weapons that are loaded into a database. So there's a lot of different uses for biometric devices. And you're going to see them more and more common in security, but you're also seeing some constraints put on these things. So what are some of the more common biodigital devices? Well, facial recognition, as we said, but voice recognition was very, very big back about 10, maybe even longer, years ago. And voice recognition is certainly used when you talk to your Google Home device or your Nest device or your Amazon device, your phone, to open things up, to talk to Siri. But it was very common in the security game for about, I'd say, closer to 15 years ago, really, but tended to die back. Same with iris and retina scans. We do see them in use, but not as much as we used to. Fingerprint readers have been around for a while, and they're quite reliable. Unfortunately, you have to use them sometimes in places where you also have to wear rubber gloves, so that kind of hurts you a little bit. Hand geometry. Now, hand geometry is actually LAX is still using hand geometry in many areas. You basically slide your fingers into a reader that has pins in it. You put a pin between each finger, and it reads the size and width and shape of hand bones, right? And everybody has a unique hand geometry, and it basically identifies you through there. Phones, watches, and wearables, although they are just using an electronic signal, right? I may use a mobile device to get into a reader, right? I have card readers that I can use my cell phone to get in and out of. I have them set for both badge and mobile phone in low security areas where people may be coming in from outside. When they get close to the door, it realizes they have their mobile phone and can open the door. But that phone has to be activated, and normally that's activated by either a thumbprint or facial recognition now. Same with wearables. Your Apple Watch can be used to open a door, but in order to get your Apple Watch to do something, you have to put in a password, and it has to be through a phone, and you have to use it through the phone in order to do certain things. So those are all biodigital. And then the implanted RFID and smart chips. It boggles the mind that somebody would do that, and I'll tell you why in a second, but people do have implanted chips in order to use for security purposes to access certain areas. So all of these different methods have some commonalities and some distinctions. One of the things that you look for is the registration and sample. How do you get a sample? So with your with your cell phone when, most of you have facial recognition now probably on your cell phone. Or if not, if you have an older cell phone, you may have thumbprint that you put on the little button on the bottom, right, so that it knows it's you. There was a self-registration. You didn't have to offer that to anyone else. You're holding the phone. In theory, your face is stored on the phone and it's stored on the front of your head, right? And those are the two places. Or are you required in some other places to provide a sample? If you're using facial recognition access to my facility, is the facial recognition stored in a central database, or is it going through your cell phone somehow? So whether you submit a sample or whether you retain the sample is a commonality or a distinction of these systems. Does the sample change? And can changes be accommodated easily? When we talk about those RFID chips, if you need an upgrade, you're getting cut, right? How about the amount of time that human interaction takes? There are some technologies which are much faster than others. Some require 3 to 4 seconds. And if you've got a high-speed entrance where you've got lots of people who are going into a building in a big city, they all get off the train at the same time, and they try to go through, you'd be jammed up because 3 seconds is far too long for high speed. There's a degree of human interaction with some of this stuff, right? Whether it be at the registration or simply to tell you to please look up and look directly into the camera, or to put your hand all the way into the hand geometry reader. What's the degree of human interaction? What's the level of failure if you don't have someone there who's constantly directing the activities of the users? Then, of course, there's privacy implications. The legal protections. Those of you who have taken my law course, we talk a lot about GDPR, the Global Data Protection Requirements, a European law that is very strict about whether or not you can collect, hold, and why you must erase on request data from people. And those legal protections can really make the use of biodigital devices an administrative nightmare. And what you want to ask yourself in every one of these is, really, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth going to something very high tech when I know that there are certain things that may be distinctions that make it harder for me to implement this? And that's why you find that biodigital devices are usually only used in the highest security areas and only for certain purposes when you have a very limited user base. Let's go over each one of those types of technologies I mentioned before and look at the pros and cons. So facial recognition uses multiple facial features to provide a unique identifier. There are different types. Some of them measure, height, width, the spacing between the eyes, those things. Others go a bit deeper, if you will, and they actually read the bone structure in face geometry, if you will. But most of them are camera-based and go with a series, an algorithm that measures distances between facial features, depth of facial features, those types of things. Now, they're getting more and more accurate, especially over the last 10 years. And registration is pretty simple. You normally take 3 controlled pictures of someone and upload it into the software. And generally speaking, that's enough to get somebody registered. Now, the problem with facial recognition is it requires an unobstructed view. Now, let's go back to my example of the subway, right? Subway in New York, Chicago, the L, any city train system or bus system. As you're trying to load people on quickly and get them through quickly, what if they're, it's a cold day and somebody's got their scarf on? It's a sunny day. They've got their big sunglasses on. How about if they have, religious wear or medical wear or some required item that they must wear, right? Someone who has a neck brace on may push their facial features together more, and it may not read accurately. And so for a high-speed entry and high-volume entry, facial recognition is truly not a great option for you. And then there's privacy. Once you've registered, your face is common knowledge. So even when you don't request access, once you get into the camera view, it can be read. And even if you didn't try to do something, if you didn't try to enter a room, if you got close enough, it's going to read your face. There's no action like putting your badge out and touching it to a reader. It's a matter of just walking up and getting caught on the camera. So there's privacy concerns because you're not requesting any service, yet the device is still reading and still registering you. Now, voice recognition is something that we're all used to because we talk to our home devices. At least I do. I have and a Amazon device, I'm not going to say her name, in every room in my house. Some of them have video screens on them. Some of them are just enough to play music. I have one in the master bath, so I can ask for the news and the weather while I'm brushing my teeth. They're very simple to register. Realistically, it just picks up on your voice, and then those devices, really, it's not even your voice that it's picking up on, it's a voice that it's picking up on. But for your cell phone, if you set it up with voice recognition, you'd want it to only pick up your voice. You'd give it a sample, and it would register you. And the beauty of voice recognition is you can add features to it. So if I have a device, biodigital device, that will react to my voice, and I speak to it, I can also ask it to do certain things. It's not just a matter of the facial recognition, let me in or don't let me in. It's a matter of, okay, now you hear my voice, now start my car, or now unlock the door, or now lock the door, or now, whatever, right? Turn the lights on and off, which I do in my home all the time, and I'm sure many of you do as well. So voice recognition adds that if this, then that feature to Biodigital, so that you can not only know it's you, but also you can then tell it what to do. Now, the problem is they're notoriously unreliable. Now, the Amazon devices and the Google Home devices are getting better at telling things. But I know that whenever I ask mine to play a certain radio station, it will play something different. I will ask it for news on one thing, and it will give me news on another. And it's very frustrating when they get caught in a loop, and then you tell them to stop, and they won't stop. They're really not very reliable in that regard. I mean, I guess they're probably 95% reliable. But can you imagine if you had 1,000 people coming into your facility each day and you asked them to use voice recognition to get in? 50 of them would be locked out. You don't want to be that security manager who has 50 people locked out each day. So voice recognition has the advantage of if this, then that, adding the feature that not only will it let you in based on your voice, but it will do certain things that you tell it to do. But the reliability factor is much lower than other biodigital devices. So iris and retina scans, again, have been around for better part of 20 years or longer. The retina scan has been around longer. The iris scan uses a standard camera to take a picture of the iris, which is where the color of your eye is in a unique pattern, whereas the retina scan goes deeper into the eye, and you must get much closer to it. You actually put your face very close to a scanner with a retina scan. And they're highly accurate, and they have a long history, and they've been used in high-security areas like police armories for a very long time. The issue with especially the retina scans, iris scans are coming back into favor because they don't go very deep, and they use a standard camera, quite frankly, to look at your eye. The retina scans were used by General Motors in a number of areas in their manufacturing plants. And everybody used them for years, and everything was fine. And then a number of people went through the normal retirement at the end of their long careers. And the problem with retiring from a job with a pension is the pension is never as big as you think it's going to be. That's just common, right? You think you're going to get a big pension, then you find out, well, we have to keep some back for your medical coverage, and it's going to be taxed. And you get less if you have dependents who are going to collect that pension after you die. And it's really kind of a disappointment to some folks. And many of them saw how bad the pension was. They thought it was going to be, say, $40,000 a year, and it ended up being $30,000. And many of them screamed, my eyes, you ruined my eyes, and looked for a medical settlement. The GM example really set back retina scans in the U.S. tremendously back in the early 2000s, and it is now just recovering, and iris tends to be the preferred method. You will find retina scans in very high security government facilities because they are certainly more accurate. They're highly accurate, and they are highly reliable, but the perceived harm that they did, as really the stigmas never went away. It's never been proven that the retina scans did any harm to anybody's eyes. However, there's that perceived, I'm going to be blinded by this thing that has people a little bit leery of using them, and you will find compliance to be very spotty, and you will find people who will refuse to use them. So we have fingerprint readers, and generally speaking, there's high-speed fingerprint readers. I've looked at one recently called the MorphoWave, where you just kind of stick your hand and pass it through, never really touch anything. It can read all 5 fingers. It takes enough images of each finger, enough to put it together, enough to determine who the person is. Thumbprint readers are probably more in use. A lot of times they're used in conjunction with a badge reader. So you put your badge against the reader, and then you put your thumb on the fingerprint reader, and it makes sure you have both of those things. The great thing about fingerprints is there's an accepted uniqueness. You know, how many times have we heard in our life, everybody has a fingerprint and every one of them is unique? I don't know how that's ever been proven until you fingerprint everybody and make sure they're unique, but there is a general consensus that everyone has a unique fingerprint. And the new devices, they highly encrypt the fingerprint, so there's no reason for the security department to actually record the fingerprint itself. You go into register and you put your fingerprint on a pad, and it takes the fingerprint and it digitizes it and puts it into a unique and protected code. And that is what, when you put your finger on the reader to get in, it goes back, it also puts it into that same code and it looks for a match. So there's no way for the security manager to reproduce the fingerprint for any reason. Now, that's great, but people don't trust that won't happen. Think about the cases that have been decided because there were fingerprints at the scene. People are very leery about giving their fingerprints to anybody. And it's really just a bit of a myth that you could plant your fingerprint having a digital image of it. I guess it could be done. I'm sure it could be done, but you know, it'd be easier to chop off your thumb and just take it and put the fingerprint on and sew your thumb back on, right? So you know, people don't trust giving their fingerprints to people because they've grown up watching police shows, knowing that when fingerprints are found at the scene, you are a guilty party. So they don't like giving away anything that could make them look guilty, even in error. And then there's the issue of injuries, right? If you're using your hand, and hands get injured a lot. I mean, it won't be a summer unless I get my finger cut somewhere, or hit it with a hammer, or you know, cut it on a blade from cleaning the lawnmower, or pulling, you know, stumps or something, right? We all injure our hands on occasion and get cuts on our hands, and if they are deep enough, wide enough, and in the right place, they may not be able to be read. So there is a bit of a issue with trust and a bit of an issue with injuries that you have to worry about with fingerprint readers. The good thing is that you can actually store the fingerprint on a badge. So follow this with me now. You have the badge that you're going to use to get in and out of places. On the back of that badge, you see a lot of times you see a magnetic stripe, or inside there's a read-write chip, right? A memory chip inside. And you write the thumbprint to that. So when I walk up to the reader, I hold my badge up to the reader, and it says, yep, that's Brian's badge. And then I put my thumbprint on the thumbprint reader next to it that's connected to it. And it looks for the thumbprint that's on the badge, and it says, yes, and Brian is with his badge because there's his thumbprint. And so it's a double authentication, but the user is carrying the thumbprint. And the security department never really has to maintain it or have it. We use it once to load it onto the badge, and then it belongs to you, and you take care of your badge. You hold your thumbprint. I don't. I only have a encrypted, constantly changing code which matches up when you put your thumb on the reader with your badge. So fingerprint readers have become a really good thing to use in low volume. Again, they take time. They take 2, 3, sometimes 4 seconds to read. They're the high speed all finger readers actually are being used in some buildings. The Citibank building in New York, which has 40 entry portals, right? They have turnstiles, and there's 40 of them in their lobby, and they're using these. But because it takes a little bit of extra time, that's why they had to have 40. If they were so fast, the volume of people, they could have done it with 20. But there's about a 1 second delay when you put your hand in before the turnstile clicks and you can get through. That's why they needed more. But again, they're a little faster. They're more common because they're cheaper, for one thing. But people tend to distrust them because they're giving up their fingerprint, or at least they perceive they are. So hand geometry is pretty common in airports, but not in the airport areas where you would go as a customer, but where people would go into storage areas for cargo and those things. LAX was using them. I believe JFK was using them for a while and still has a few. And they use the unique bone size and structure as the identifier. Heavily used by the government, which means that they are covered under the Safety Act, which allows commercial customers, like a business, to use them with the same protections the government would have against a lawsuit if something goes wrong. They're a little slow to respond, so you don't want to use them in a high volume area. Again, you have to slide your hand in, you have to get in between the pins, and if you did that and tried to get people through it that is in a high volume area, right? If you wanted to use them for a concert venue, right, where you're going to have somebody with you have barcodes sometimes on a concert ticket, and you want somebody to go through and scan their barcode when they come through. That can be done very quickly. Barcodes are read quickly, except when they don't line up, right? but hand geometry takes a little bit more. And plus they have pins that stick up, and anything that has anything that sticks up gets bent, right? Pins stick up, you hit it with something, somebody's, sliding their hand in, they forget they have something in their hand, they hit it, it needs to be reset, it needs to be calibrated. Readers with pins require more maintenance, and so hand geometry is kind of fallen out of favor with the exception of very limited areas where you have a very small user group. So we all carry a phone, and most of us have some kind of a smartwatch, a Fitbit, a Apple Watch, something like that. Not all of us, but many of us. But we all carry a phone, and the wearables essentially is just some variation on that watch. They use the built-in verifications in the cell phone or smartwatch to provide an identifier, right? Very low hurdle on registration because they're simple apps. And in many cases, you can take a tag off of the app on the phone itself. You can get many users to provide the credential for their phone because people want to use their phone. They want to use their phone to get in and out of buildings until they actually do it and find out that it's kind of a pain in the butt because oftentimes your phone is in your pocket, and if you're just coming in from the outside, you got to dig to get to your phone. You're not necessarily carrying it every cold day. Now you've got to have your phone to hold it close enough to a reader to get into an area. But people tend to want to use their phone. When you tell them, oh, I can get you in with just your phone, they think that's the greatest thing in the world. The credential can be traded, okay? You control the initial registration. So if I get a new cell phone and go buy a new cell phone and put it on my account and I put the credential on, I can hand that cell phone to someone else, right? If I use their thumbprint and I just hand it to my daughter is on my cell phone plan, and I could take a cell phone that's under my name and she uses it and puts her thumbprint on it, and we could register that as me, and it could be used to get in places where I am. So there's a bit of a user trust that you have to have, right? The other thing is that when you have a facility and you decide, okay, I'm going to use cell phones to get people in, I'm not going to have badges, I'm not going to have any wearables. Everybody carries a cell phone. We're all going to use it to get in. That's how I'm going to do it, and we're going to load that credential onto your cell phone as an app, and that's what you use to get in. You probably won't get much pushback from people except for those that don't have a device, and especially those that don't have a company-provided device. So if I have a cell phone of my own, but my job for the company doesn't give me a cell phone allowance, I may very well say, sure, I'll do that. Here's my cell phone bill, pay it. If you want me to use the phone to get in, and that's what you're going to give me, then either give me a phone to do it with or pay my cell phone bill. That has been tried and tested many times with mobile credentials. That is why you have readers that will read cell phones and badges. For those who tell you that, no, I don't want you using my cell phone unless you pay for it, then you just give them a badge and they go back to old school. But it does open up the question of who's paying for the credential. For a badge that costs $6 or $7, I can do that. For a cell phone that has a $35, $40 a month bill, that's going to get a little expensive as a security manager. So then finally, we have the implanted RFID, the radio frequency ID, or the smart chip that people are putting in their wrist, right? On the top of the wrist is where they put them. And there was I'll see if I can find the article for you all, and you can take a look at it. It was pretty interesting. They're very small. Then they were implanted under the skin, and a particular company in California, 250, I believe, employees. Maybe it was 150, but it was a small number, relatively speaking. All volunteered to do it, and they used that to get in their building. It's not shareable, right? It's in your skin, so it's not like you're going to share it with somebody. I suppose you could cut it out and give it to somebody. But the technology actually needs to stay at certain temperatures, and if you remove it from the body, it shuts itself off. However, what happens when tech gets upgraded? I've been through. Let's see. I'm an old school guy, and I have an iPhone 10, and I had an iPhone 1, right? And that wasn't all that long ago. I don't mind changing out my iPhone, changing out my laptop, changing out my Apple Watch, other devices that I've had. I sure as heck don't want to go and get my skin cut and have a chip taken out and put back in every time there's a change in technology. So that's not user-friendly to most people. I would suggest that we would see some form of a visible tattoo rather than an implanted chip going forward if that becomes a thing. But I think people are a little bit more concerned about the effect on their body when it comes to actually intruding the skin, right? We'll give our voice, we'll give our thumbprint if we have to, we'll give our hand geometry up, we'll let you take a picture of our iris or our retina, but I'm not letting you implant something in me that you can follow me around. It's a little bit too much, Orwell. 1984 kind of stuff for most people. But it does beg the question, could anything that's in your body today be used for identity verification? And the answer is absolutely. Artificial joints have a serial number. Pacemakers have a serial number that can be, in many cases, insulin pumps and pacemakers, you control them from the outside, right? They're almost a radio type device. So you can definitely identify who they're in, because if you couldn't control that device. Now, what might be the drawback of that? Well, you could be identified just about anywhere, right? I think from a privacy perspective, that's really where we're going to have the heavy lift, is from that privacy perspective when it comes to medical type devices or implanting devices. From a privacy perspective, okay, should we be forced to provide information on our medical issues to our employers? Because if I'm offering my employer a retina scan, if I'm offering them hand geometry, could that not be used to show that I have arthritis in my hand, that I have vision problems? If I give them information on my pacemaker and use that for a security purpose or any other purpose, could that not just tell them that I have a pacemaker and I have a heart issue? The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, protects employees from giving certain information to their employers, and also protects prohibits employers from asking for certain information. But let's just say that we used pacemakers. And I had to go into my security department and said, you're using my pacemaker to let me in on the building, which is very effective, right? We could do that. You walk up, it's in your chest. I pick up on it with a device and I say, okay, that is definitely Brian. That's his pacemaker because it matches the serial number. It's not in anybody else's chest. I'm going to let him in. But what happens when it's time for me to get a new one? Isn't that going to my employer and saying, I'm having issues with my heart and I need to get a new pacemaker? I think that's sharing of medical information. And with biodigital devices, in every case, we are sharing something with our employer that many employees simply do not want to share. That is why we will always see badges and mobile devices as the preferred ways that people get in and out of buildings. We will see high security areas where we demand a biodigital device. We demand a fingerprint or an iris scan because that is what's required to have definitive proof that the person getting in is the person we have given permission to. Access to government top secret information, perhaps, access to extremely high value inventory. That we can make the demand. But I think that the takeaway, one of the big takeaways here is the juice worth the squeeze? Yes, these biodigital devices are out there. Yes, when you become a security manager, there will be people that will come to sell them to you. You really need to ask yourself, is this proper? Is this something I want to get into? Do I want to ask my employees to give up some privacy? And is it matching? Is this increased security from the biodigital device matching the resource I'm trying to protect? So for this week, takeaways are pretty simple. I want you to understand the definition of a biodigital device for security purpose, right? It's really just using those three factors in the definition. Understand those and know what a biodigital device really is. The common uses are access control and video scanning for crowds. Again, there are many more uses for biodigital devices, and there are 1,000 salesmen who will try to sell those to you. If anybody is really interested in those things, heck, I'll have you, come along on at a GSX conference, and we can go visit every one of those booths of guys who have got a biodigital device that will do something for your security. But the common uses are access control and video scanning of crowds. Understand the pros and cons of those various methods. They all are good for some things, and they all come with some baggage, mainly because of the privacy laws and the privacy concerns of the end user. Think about what the future might hold. What's the next step in biodigital devices? I really don't know. If I did, I'd patent it and, I'd be off on an island somewhere right now. But try to think about what you think the future might hold. What's next? And also, I want you to think about whether privacy or security is more important, right? That's a big thing. I prefer to keep some things private. I want to keep my medical history private. I don't have any big medical concerns. I'll share that with you. I'm a pretty healthy guy. But I don't think my employer needs to understand everything about my medical history. They don't need to understand, what tests I've had or those types of things. But if I share some biodigital information with them, they will know that I potentially have some rare disease. And you will find that employees simply do not want to share that with their employer, including you as the security manager. So think about whether privacy or security is more important, and I think you'll come up with your own answer, and think about it from the employee perspective. So this week, short lecture. There's reading. There's a full chapter in the book, and I would like you to read that entire chapter and get a feel for those biodigital devices. We're going to put our cameras onto our drawings this week, and you're going to specify the types of cameras and the mounts. Be frugal. Don't get crazy with your cameras. They're very expensive, and next week I'm coming out with the price list and the budget. And looking at the drawings, and I've been looking at them as we go along. This week I'll be grading them all, and if you haven't heard from me, you're doing fine. And the reason I do that is you've been adding to them all along. I can look at the final drawing and then give you the same grade on the others because you've made some changes as you went along. Your first drawings with locks on it, some of you have changed those for the better after thinking about it, other discussions. When you added in readers, you changed the locks around. You originally had a privacy set on a door, and now you put an electric, you put a reader on it. Well, you had to change to an electric strike or a mag lock. So you've made changes. I'll be looking at that last drawing, and then if that is acceptable, then you'll get a 5 on that, and we'll backdate the 5s all the way down the line. If it's not, then I'll go down and look at each one individually and see what might need to be changed. But when the budget comes out, don't be surprised if many of you who have added a lot of devices, and there are a few of you that have added a lot of devices, a lot of PIRs I've seen in the alarm sections. Those are okay. There's nothing wrong with it from a logic standpoint. But when I put a price on them, and then you understand the failure rate on those, you may want to change your mind on those. But that's what we're going to do this week coming up. There is no other deliverable other than the drawings. Have those in by Sunday. It is Easter week, so if you want to get them in early, that's even better because I will start working on them as soon as they come in this week. And you will be hearing from your team leaders on weeks 13 and 14 this coming week because after the final withdrawal date, which is Monday, I'll be sending out the team assignments to the team leaders. With that, have a great week, and I will see you on campus.